Hi everyone, I'm Bear from Bear Fox Marketing. In this SEO audit breakdown, I really want to go over the main components that make up good solid SEO. There's a lot of complexity that can go into it, but people I feel like really do make it a lot more complicated than what it really is. So in this webinar, I really want to be able to pull back the curtain and quantify and show you what numbers we're looking at and why we're looking at it to make sure you have a successful SEO campaign. My intention is that by the end of this webinar, you'll understand what key metrics to look at, understand the SEO process, understanding how your website plays into that process, as well as the authority that comes into your website. So you really understand these are the key things that have to be done in order to have a successful campaign, and then what that ultimately will look like. So really, by the time you get done, you'll understand what's necessary to make that happen. You can even use the knowledge you get from this webinar to be able to assess SEO companies, understand what is they're talking about. I feel like a lot of people that reach out to us are frustrated that they feel people are trying to talk over their head. They don't understand what is they're paying for, those kinds of things. So really, at the end of this meeting, I want you understanding what good SEO looks like on your site as well as off your site, what those key components are, what you should know before you start an SEO campaign, what those metrics look like, and ultimately how to assess if you're going to get those kind of results, if you're on track, if you're not, and make sure if you do want to get that outsourced to someone, you can hire the right SEO agency. So here we go.
So with this, the audit is going to be broken down into three main components. We have really why the audit. What is it that we're looking to accomplish with the audit? What key metrics, what kind of software we use to evaluate our website as well as our competition. We're going to be looking at the keyword data. We're going to try and quantify who it is we're competing against and why, a lot of things. So really an audit, I think, is the quickest way and the best way to see where your money is going to go before you put it in. A lot of times with an SEO company or an SEO project you're working on, you're going to have a pretty heavy cost. And one of the biggest complaints that I see all the time is, okay, I'm going to be spending X number of thousands of dollars per month on an SEO campaign. When can I expect to see some kind of results? And ultimately, it could be years down the road. It could be months. It could be, generally in SEO, it's not going to be weeks. So you're looking months to years. And really, you're going in a little bit blind. If you don't really know what you're getting into before you get into it, you could spend $5,000 a month for, let's say, 10 months or 12 months. You're into it $50,000, $60,000 and have no idea what kind of results you can really expect to get, if any. So really, that's kind of one of those, you really want to know what you're getting into before you get into it. And so at a simple audit, if you really have someone who knows what they're doing, you can do an audit for a couple $1,000s, sometimes less, sometimes more, and really understand what kind of return you can at least hope to get and figure out why you're going the direction you're going. So really, it helps to curve any big time investment before you get into it. With that, the audit is going to be comprised of two major components. We're going to have your on-site element and we're going to have the off-site. So we're going to look at your website, the site structure, speed, all those elements that go into how Google scans your site, what it looks at. And then we're going to look at the off-site elements. So we're going to look at who essentially is linking to you, how they're linking to you, how that affects your website, how Google views it, a lot of those major elements that go into how you're ranked. And then we're going to be looking at your competitors. We're going to look at, okay, how good are they? Are they great? Are they not so great? What does that actually look like? How many pages of content do they have? Is it good content? How much does Google actually like the content? You're going to hear lots of people saying in the internet in general, you're going to hear them say, content is king. Very commonly stated. I agree with that with a slight caveat. I believe marketable content is king. So if you have 10,000 pages of the best content in the world, you're the foremost expert in your industry, but no one can find your content, no one reads it, how good is that content really? How many people are you helping? You're not helping yourself, you're not helping anyone else. So really, being able to market and get exposure for that content is really where it's at. So we can look at that as well.
And with that, so the question remains, so why should you listen to me? So this next slide is just a little bit about me, just to introduce myself. So I've been doing SEO marketing for about 15 years, 15 plus years. I started my SEO career, shall we say, by doing on-page optimization for 53,000 craft products. Yeah, I'm not really a crafting person, but regardless, that was kind of where I got started. So I had quite the learning curve and things I learned from all kinds of things about crafting. I ran a successful publishing company for over 6 years. I managed all the SEO strategies, which was essentially the entire focus of being able to generate revenue for the company was their SEO strategy. I started my first digital marketing agency 8 years ago. I have co-authored the Bear Fox Principle, and I have managed over tens of millions of dollars in ad spend. So that's a little bit about me and my background. Now, I know what you're saying. I can already hear you. Just because you've been around for 15 years doesn't mean it's actually any proof that I'm good at what I do. So I get that. I've got a couple case studies just to show you a little bit of what I can do and what I've done in the past. So, well, the first case I want to look at is actually a consumer packaged goods company. They had essentially kind of a probiotic that they were marketing. We started from essentially from scratch. I mean, they had a little bit of traffic coming in before we took over. We took over pretty early on. I think they'd been in business for about 6 months. We took it over, built it up, and then there's kind of an added email piece that shows ultimately the impact that SEO had, which is why I want to focus on this one to get started. So these are the actual Google Analytics from the company. We took it over. So in May 1st to May 31st, we took it over in June. So right after this particular time frame, but we took it over. This is their organic search traffic. As you can see here, they had 4,600 people roughly going to their site. And then they had about $23,000 in revenue that was generating. We took it over a month later. Again, the orange line is, I guess, that 2018 time frame they had. In 2019, we actually had over 40,000 people per month going to their site. So it went from about 4,500 to 40,000 12 months later. And then the number I want to focus on here is this is, again, a 30-day window of $212,000 in actual revenue that they were able to generate just from their their organic channel that we were able to get. One added thing here that I don't have a slide on, but I wanted to let you know that they had an email capture for all their SEO traffic. SEO was kind of their main focus of getting any kind of new exposure to the company. And they got that email capture in place. And after about a year of collecting the emails, they had thousands of emails they had collected, people who were interested in their product. The first 6 months of 2019, they had, I think, about $20,000 in sales. The second 6 months, we kind of sat them down, talked to them, said, look, this is really a huge opportunity you guys need to start capitalizing on. Went through, created some flows, really started making that an emphasis for the company. And lo and behold, 6 months later, they made over $1 million in actual sales from their email channel that were all collected from their organic search channel. So it had a direct impact. The company at that point in time was making between $2 and $3 million between those two channels per year. So this is one example of the power of SEO. Now on this next slide, I have a few case studies that I want to break down in a specific way so you can see how it unfolds, how a well-run SEO campaign, what it actually looks like, that progress. So there's a process to getting good SEO results. And if you don't understand that process, you can really shoot yourself in the foot by having the wrong kinds of expectations. So it really is 3 phases to be able to get the results you want. And we'll go into each one of these as we go throughout this presentation. So the first one, we're going to talk about backlinks, referring domains, backlinks, the quality and the quantity. You're going to hear that a lot with any kind of an SEO professional. It's all about the links coming in, depending on who you talk to. But most of the time, they're going to be talking about links. You're going to hear the phrase backlinks. So we'll dive into that. The next phase is going to be your rankings. Once you build up the authority to your website, then you're going to get rankings. The rankings are broken down into 3 subsets or 3 phases there. You've got the top 11 through 100. So you're not going to really see any traffic from that. But then you have the top 4 through 10, and then you have the top 1 through 3, which is ultimately what everyone is shooting for. And then you have the kind of the last phase, and that's your traffic to convert into actual money, into sales. So if you've done your SEO strategy correctly, the kinds of keywords and the kind of authority you have built is going to lead to traffic that actually converts and makes you money. So if you're starting an SEO campaign and you don't understand that the traffic that leads to money for conversions is the last phase of this process, you're going to cut yourself off too soon and not understand, well, the SEO didn't work. Why didn't it work? And ultimately look at these metrics along the way to make sure you're going to get number 3. It's not one of those, well, that's the last result, so there's nothing to measure in the interim. Not true at all. You can look at that and say, okay, yes, links are being built. What's the quality? What's the quantity? We'll get into how to actually assess that. Then we have the rankings. Okay, what kind of keywords are making progress on, and then you can see, so you have a way to manage those expectations without flying blind. So you really can hold yourself or whoever it is that's working on your SEO campaigns accountable to make sure you will actually get that traffic that will lead to sales eventually. So with this next case study I want to really break down, and I think I chose this one because I think it's going to be really relevant for a lot of businesses out there. So that's why I showcase this one to kind of walk you through the process. You can see the results that happened and kind of what took them from where they were to where they are. So one thing with this company is they're actually a company here located in Boise, Idaho. That's where I'm located. They sell flagpoles. And he actually focused primarily on trade shows, was really kind of his bread and butter. We started working with him at the end of 2019 and started building. You can kind of see even from this graph. So this is a graph of their referring domains or backlinks going into the site. We started working with them in 2019. They had a pretty small budget. There wasn't really a lot going on there. We started building their links. They did have some links drop off that they'd been trying to build before. So there's a little bit of fluctuation here with the overall consistency of it. We'd build links and some would drop off. We'd keep building them. But ultimately, they started seeing some really good solid progress in 2020. And then it just kind of exploded and took off. Once he increased his budget, we were able to build more links, more referring domains, and it really took off. So one thing that's interesting here is he started at the end of 2019, mid 2019, I think is where we were, and then in 2020, as you all know, COVID hit, and his trade shows were shut down. So his web business was exclusively his main source of actually driving. He had wholesale and whatnot set up, but really his website was his bread and butter. And if he hadn't been doing this, he would have been in a much worse situation. So he really took control, realized trade shows was his main focus, wanted to get away from that. And fortunately, had really been fine tuning his website, making it work better, putting SEO into it, putting a little bit of advertising budget. There wasn't a lot of money to spend on SEO because he was doing Google ads as well, some Facebook ads. So there were multiple channels he was going after. But that being said, he started working on it and it just took off. So his referring domains have really gone up because he was able to focus more, see those results coming in, and he increased his budget. One thing I want to break down here, so we've got referring domains and backlinks. So a lot of times those two phrases are used synonymously, but there is a difference. The easiest way to explain it, when I talk about referring domains or backlinks, most of the time when I use the phrase backlinks, I'm going to be referring to referring domains. So there's a reason I look at referring domains when establishing the authority of a website. One of the reasons I look at that is they're harder to get, and they're harder to get for this reason. So if Facebook had a blog post about your website, and that blog post had 10 paragraphs, each paragraph had a link going to your website, you would have 10 referring backlinks, 10 backlinks, and one referring domain is essentially how that breaks down. So that's the difference between a referring domain and a backlink. One referring domain from Facebook, but you would have 10 backlinks. What happened in, I think it was the early 2000s, a lot of hackers noticed that Google likes quantity of backlinks and quality. And what they would do is they would get one good solid referring domain, that was considered authoritative for its industry, and it would get a link on every single page of that website. It's called the run of the site link. And they would easily get one referring domain. And if this website had 1,000 pages of content, they'd have 1,000 backlinks essentially overnight. So they were able to kind of game the system very quickly. Google saw that, made some modifications to it. And so I feel like there's much more emphasis focused on the number of referring domains as there is the number of backlinks for that reason. So one thing I want to put emphasis on here is this is step one. Building out the referring domains is step one to be able to get those SEO results. The next phase, which I addressed in the previous slide, is the keyword rankings. So this particular website, I wanted to show you that they were down here. They were about 1,000 at one point. I think they were 2,000, just kind of floundering. And then we started adding content. We had a consistent content strategy for them, brought them in. They made some changes to their site, which they were negatively impacted by without the proper 3-on redirects and just some technical things that were not done to their site correctly. Went in, got those corrected, and then their keyword rankings. So essentially the top level, this is going to be that 11 through 100. Started building up. So you can see this right here. They went from 1,000, 2,000. Right now they're at 7,000 keywords that they're relevant for. They've got 900 keywords they're on the first page in Google for, and 247 of those keywords, as you can see how it kind of took off here, they are in the top 1 through 3 for their niche. So that's really what took off. A lot of people will look at this and say, you know, I know you're focusing on the majority of this traffic is on pages, 2 through 10. What do I care? I mean, really, no one goes past the first page. Why would you even focus on that metric? And in the SEO world, that really is the first indicator of how well your website is performing. If you're not going up in the top 100, you're probably not going up in the top 4 through 10 or 1 through 3. So it's kind of that first indicator, almost like when a person starts sneezing, their first sign of, oh, they're starting to get sick. Their body's fighting something. You better start resting. You better start taking your vitamins because you're going to get sick. And in the SEO world, that's very similar. You're going down, you're going to get hit in the top 10 if you're going down the top 100. If you're going up, then great. A lot of times you're going to see that trend. You can see it here where this started going up. There was a huge difference here. Then all of a sudden it really went up, and then all of a sudden they started going up dramatically in the top 1 through 10. So it's one of those top indicators to say, is Google liking what I'm doing? Are they not? Are they finding what I'm doing helpful, authoritative? What's happening before you have to wait until it gets to the first page. So again, it's one of those ways, an added step to assess, am I on the right track or am I not? Is it working or is it not? Do I need to do extra effort? Really, just instead of sitting back and waiting, I don't want to wait. I want to be proactive and make sure I'm on the right track. And this is one of those ways to do that. Now, on the next slide, you're going to find, I think this is very interesting, what happened to his actual traffic value. So this is an estimation of where he's at. When we took over his traffic value, I think it was rated at just over $1,000 per month is what it was valued at. Right now, it's valued at $8,700 per month. It's getting up higher and higher every month. I'm expecting that to be over $10,000, probably approaching that $20,000 a month relatively quickly. This screenshot here is really going to show. So this data is pulled from a company called Ahrefs, which we'll get into shortly here as far as what software we use. It's a third-party software. This is an estimate. I found it to be really a little suspect, and we'll get into, I guess, some of the issues there with the traffic value estimations and just some of the SEO tools we have to work with. If you actually had the internal data to show what the company was actually doing, it would probably be noticeably higher than this. Typically, I've seen it to be usually double of what they'll show you here. But regardless, this is kind of showing that trend that once you see those keyword traffic rankings going up, ultimately there's value. So if it's good SEO, you don't want just any kind of traffic. That ultimately, this is one thing I love to put an emphasis on to all of our clients. Most SEO professionals will say, my focus, my job is to get traffic going to your website. So in order to do that, I have to get rankings. I get rankings, I get traffic. Conversions, that's your problem. Making money off of your company, off your website, that's your problem. You're the business owner, you deal with that. And while I can understand and I can appreciate that, I feel like that doesn't really help business owners. That the whole reason, the whole point of having a number one ranking is to have good traffic that will make conversions and sales on your website. So, simply stated, SEO, search engine optimization, is a means to an end. It's not about the number one ranking. It's about sales you would get from a number one ranking. So if your number one ranking isn't producing sales, who really cares? It's a vanity metric that doesn't really mean much. As a business owner, I want to make sure that ranking equates to something that I can show in my company, some kind of profit, some kind of production, something as far as why I'm doing it. Why else would I be investing in that number one ranking if I can't make sales from it? So for me, if it falls short of those conversions coming in, if your website's high and tight, there's elements that your website has to be fixed to make sure you can convert the traffic coming in, but ultimately you have to have the conversions. So if you're not getting conversions from the traffic, your keyword intent might not be right. It might not be the right kinds of keywords. People are typing in to find your website and it's just not relevant for what they want. They're not going to convert. To me, that is a failed SEO campaign. You've got to have the sales to justify the effort to get the number one ranking. So this is one way to say, yeah, the traffic you're getting ranking for is actually valuable traffic. Right here is one way to measure and say, yeah, if you were to be bidding on this kind of traffic, it would cost you $8,000 to $20,000 per month to replace it if you lost it from Google. So that's one way to show value in the effort you're doing for your actual SEO efforts. Good. So that being said, just want to touch base one more time at the risk of sounding like I'm beating a dead horse. I want to make sure that we are clear on the process here. So again, you have the backlinks referring domains being built. You've got the quality and the quantity of links coming in. You've got the rankings. You've got that 11 through 100, 4 through 10, 1 through 3, and then you have the traffic to convert. I want to make sure that's really clear. The point is, I've seen so many instances where people will get an SEO campaign going. They don't see the results they're expecting or want to see, despite how we may have broken down the process. They're not getting it straight. They want the traffic and the conversions coming in before the rankings show up. And when the rankings start showing up, they're like, well, why am I not making conversions? It's because you're still ranked number 30. Or number 20. It takes a process to get that top ranking. You have to be able to get there first. And that's why SEO is a slow process. Once you get it, it's incredibly valuable. It converts really well if it's been done well. So it does a great job to be able to grow your company. However, if you get these processes mixed up, I've seen companies do it. I've seen them invest $20,000, $30,000. I've seen them invest $50,000, $60,000 and more, and they'll wait 4 or 5 months, frustrated, and then they cut it off. And ultimately, I feel like what they did is they really were this guy down here. They were really close. They were just on that verge of breaking through, getting the result they were looking for. And because they didn't have the right kinds of expectations to understand the process, they walked away at the last minute. I would say in some of those instances, they were months away from reaping a top 10, a top 3 ranking. They were making great progress. I was really happy with what I saw, but they weren't. And because no amount of explaining to them, like, this is how it works, could get through to them, they just quit and then went to another channel, which I believe failed as well. Or it was profitable, but not as much as it could have been. It was just kind of a mess. So just make sure you understand what you're getting into and how to measure that progress. Have the correct expectations to really make a campaign successful. I feel like if you've got the right team behind you that's really doing good, solid, quality work, they're showing it to you. Make sure that aligns with the correct time frame of when you can actually get those kinds of results coming in. So that being said, the next slide we're going to get into here is really going to dive into a lot of the components that are going to make up a sound SEO strategy. We have the on-page, the relevancy factor, shall we say. We're going to look at the link structure, the site speed, the security, duplicate content. There's all kinds of smaller elements to a website you can look at and say, this needs to be fixed. Make this as friendly as possible. These are generally Google's best practice guidelines, all those kinds of things with how your website should be structured. And then we have the second piece, which is going to be the off page, the popularity or a trust factor. One thing that helps with Google and working with getting ranked with Google is to look at it from Google's perspective. Google's product, the thing they're being paid for essentially, or the reason you're using them for, is one thing. It's the results page. So it's called a SERPs page, a search engine results page for SERP. So that's what that stands for. That ultimately is really everything that Google does comes down to that one page. It needs to have relevant ads at the top 3, 4 spots. And then you're going to have the organic listings, the map section, organic listings. And really, if they don't have good results there, it has to be relevant to what you're looking for, and it has to be, shall we say, trustworthy. They need that website to give whoever's looking for that product or service a good experience. If they start producing website referrals, shall we say, that don't give a good user experience, they are going to lose that customer and they'll go to Bing or some other search engine. And that ultimately is what they focus on. So if you can look at it from Google's perspective and say, okay, if there are a million websites that are about this particular topic, why should I trust you? What is it that's special about you that gives this user an amazing experience that I should put you number one versus someone else? And that will kind of help to kind of figure out, okay, well, these are kind of the unique elements that I have. And now how do we showcase that to Google to give us that particular ranking? And one of those things that's going to come into play is going to be referring domains and backlinks. And that's when we're going to talk about the quality, the quantity, who is doing the linking, the anchor text being used, all those kinds of factors. Now, and as far as which one's more important, a lot of people will look at this. I think there's some estimates to say the off page. So the popularity factor is really going to be maybe 2/3 of, or even higher, of what really makes a website rank well. Quite possible. I think there is probably a heavier weight to the off-page element. However, it's really, I think, helpful to look at it not as though the on-page and off-page are two separate pieces or entities here. I would say they work together and work together very closely. If you can imagine a pyramid, the on-page is going to be the foundation of that pyramid, and the off-page is going to be the kind of the top part of it. So if you don't have a good solid foundation, your pyramid ultimately is going to crumble. So just make sure that on page is locked down solid. It might make up the smaller percentage, but it's a very important percentage of your overall SEO efforts. And then add the off page to it after that. So in the next stage, we're going to look at the actual tools that we're going to use to figure out, okay, and try and quantify what it is we're looking at. So in this situation, there are a lot of phrases to describe what Google does. A lot of companies, people will say Google does Google. I call Google essentially the proverbial 800-pound gorilla. They do what they do what they want, and there really isn't much that people can say or do to try and refute what's been done. Or if they disagree with it, that's Google doesn't really care. So that being said, really Google's product is the way that they rank websites and that ranking that they give you. They protect that to a very high degree. They have been sued by various governments trying to figure out exactly what they do and get that algorithm that they have created, and they've won every time. That's their intellectual property. They do what they do. So I use a lot of different software to try and find one thing. I'm trying to find consistency of the data to get insights into how Google looks at a website. Every little thing I can find is one more thing we can add to our favor to help us get the ranking that we need and the results that we're looking for, essentially. So I use a lot of different softwares. One major software I do rely on is Ahrefs. I feel like they've got very good, reliable data with what they offer. There are a lot of other softwares, SEO softwares out there. If there's one that you find that is consistent and reliable, great. Every SEO tool I find out there is inaccurate to one degree or another because they're not multi-billion-dollar corporations the size of Google. It's very difficult to compete on that level. So with multiple softwares, I usually will look for consistency across multiple platforms. Whatever I can find, I go with. If I can go to Google to find out what they think of my website, I do. So there are some tools out there. Webmaster Tools is one that Google, they used to call it, now it's Search Console. You can actually put that code on your site, and Google will give you pages, problems, technical issues with your site to show you, here's some duplicate content, here are some crawl problems they're having with your site. It takes this amount of time to crawl your site, whatever the case might be. Google also has a great tool called developers.google.com is where it's located, and it's Google Page Speed. So you can go to them and see how they view your site. They'll take a screenshot and show you what's actually taken place and how they would categorize or qualify your website. SEMrush is a great tool as well. SEO Moz, Google Analytics, GT Metrics. We can go on and on and on, but ultimately, there's a number of tools you can use. Again, we're trying to quantify and find consistency of the data with all the tools that we do, and it's all about the accuracy of the data. If whatever data you have, if it's not accurate and really giving you a good insight into what you're looking at, it's really not worth much. Now, one other way that I'm going to use Ahrefs, not only for their backlink data, but they also have a great tool to scan your website for overall site health. This is going back to that pyramid, the kind of foundation I was telling you about with the on-site optimization. It's a great tool. Go through, set it up. It will automatically scan your website and find errors. It gives you a health site score. Then it will give you a detailed list of why you got an 83 instead of 100, 100 out of 100. So the scale is 1 to 100, 100 being the highest. 83 is a good score. I mean, it really is. If you can start there, you're in a pretty good spot. I generally try and get all these errors fixed. So I don't want any red errors. I do want to fix some of the warnings. If I can get a website health up to 90, 95%, I consider done, good, move on to the next thing. A lot of people will try and get the 100% score. My experience would dictate it's just not worth the effort. Get your site clean, mostly perfected, and then move on. Check that box and get something that will move the needle and get you results. So you can dive into here. You can find the exact list of errors you need. It can be broken links. It can be a variety of all kinds of different issues. Depending on who your programmer was, they can be very complicated. They can be very simple. It could be as simple as a missing meta description, a simple like one duplicate page where you've got a copy of the same thing twice. So focus on the errors first. If you can, do as many of the warnings as you can. It depends on your budget, whatever you need to, but ultimately get that 90 to 95% score, move on. The next element you're looking at is speed. Speed is huge. There's a few different ways to look at speed. You have your actual website speed, then you have your actual server speed. Now, the server speed is going to be the base level. You need a good server. If your website is fast, but you're on a slow server, you're going to be hit. You're not going to get the kind of rankings you're going to need or want to have. So make sure your server is fast. You go through, you can run a speed server check to make sure you're getting a good rating. Here, an A is really the minimum I accept for a client. I want an A to an A plus is the speed. There's really no need to have a slow server. You can upgrade your server to an A plus for a few extra dollars a year. It is not that much to get a good server and make sure your website is fast. And then as far as the actual website speed, what you want to look at here is there's two different ways to rank it, how Google's going to view it. You have your desktop speed and you have your mobile speed. And this is from developers.google.com. So Google's going to give its own score on how it scans your website, and it will give you reasons why it gave you an 11 or a 56. 56, as you can tell down here, is about average. Not that out of the way. Make sure this is 56. It's on the low end of average. I would love to get this up to an 80, 90% would be much more ideal. Mobile speed, most websites I see in the mobile speed are usually not doing great. I feel like it's a little unfair on Google's side of things. The tool that they use, the way they scan your website, it feels like it is so strict that you have to have your website optimized for a 10-year-old smartphone. It's just not realistic to be able to have the cutting edge stuff and have your site optimized to go so far back. So I think if you can get to a 50 on your mobile, you're actually doing pretty good. If you can get faster than that, great. You're going to be setting that yourself that much further apart from your competition. But again, you're going to have to look at your budget, what you have available, and what you're actually getting to make sure that it's going to be worth that investment. And then you've got to make sure your site is secure. Even if you're not selling a specific product, it might be a service you have, whatever it is, your site needs to be secure, and it needs to be secure across the entire site. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen a website that is secure half the site, or it's not linked correctly. And so half the site is secure, half the site isn't, or whatever the case might be. There's all kinds of different issues. I've actually seen instances where they saved $1 a year to get a lower level certificate of security certificate, SSL. One extra dollar a year would have actually given them a better score and made the whole site secure. They were literally, I mean, whoever they had do it for them tried to save $1, $2 a year and essentially made the website less effective. So just make sure you've got these main elements in place and working, and then you can focus on the other pieces. We can go all day on the actual on-site nitpicking types of things, but these are really kind of big core pieces. If you can get those things fixed, whatever that list might be with your errors, some of your warnings, the security, the speed, the server, those elements, and make sure your site is relevant for what you're searching for. Those are really going to be the main components to getting the rankings you want from an on-site perspective. The next piece that's really going to come into play is going to be the off-site authority you're building. So looking at the off-site ranking factors is what we're going to look at here, the off-site evaluation. How are we going to beat our competitors? This is really where a lot of business owners get excited when we do an audit. A lot of these metrics here have been simplified. I can get really extravagant. I'm actually prepared audits that were anywhere between 300 and 400 pages thick. I can get down into all kinds of elements. Again, going back to the on-site pieces of your H1 tags and the how many links, clicks away from your main top navigation these certain pages are, all kinds of things. And really, I want to make this audit or this webinar for the audit really comprehensive enough that really just about anyone can go through and have enough education that they can make an educated decision about maybe an agency they want to hire to make sure that they are speaking to the points and being included in what's going on and that they're not just being kind of taken. I feel like one of the biggest complaints I get is people hire out of just kind of blind faith. They evaluate the best they can, but ultimately don't have the tools necessary to make sure they're making a good decision. So some of these elements are going to be simplified. But that being said, was done with the intent that you can go through, look at this, understand what's going on. So I want to quantify what it is we're looking at. The case study I have here is just for a design company. If you were looking for certain design elements of a product or a car or whatever the case might be, here are some of the websites you'd come across. And these are some of the key metrics we're going to look at. So these metrics are being pulled from Ahrefs. If you set up your own Ahrefs account, they do have a free option. You can see the same numbers I'm seeing here. There's going to be a few additional metrics they're looking at, but I wanted to distill it down to just these 5 key components that we want to look at. So one of the biggest competitors in this industry is going to be Frog Design and IDEO. So if you Google Frog, just the word Frog Design actually comes up number 1. So in Google's mind, Frog isn't an actual frog, it is a frog design. So one thing to kind of keep in mind there, it's interesting, if you Google the word Apple, you don't get apples, the actual fruit, you get the company, Apple. So Apple Computers. So just one thing to keep in mind there. The main metrics we're looking at here is there's going to be 5 key metrics we look at. Again, this is about quantification. So the UR and DR is going to be a rating system of 0 to 100, 100 being the highest. One thing to take into account here, though, is it's more difficult to get to 80 from 70 than it is from 20 to 30. So it gets increasingly more difficult as you go up the scale. A UR, to put some context around that, a UR of 82 is actually quite good. A DR of 76 is really good, very authoritative, very hard to get that. So they are considered strong. UR, you can actually go down to a specific page within a website to find out what that URL or that specific page is as far as how authoritative it is. The DR is the domain rating, so the website as a whole and how authoritative the website as a whole is. Referring domains. This is going back to that key component of backlinks versus referring domains. So they have 7,470 individual websites that are linking to their website. They used to have as many as 18,000, but right now they have about 7,500 approximately. They have about 18,000 keywords that they're ranked in the top 100 in Google for. So 18,000 keywords, and their traffic value is $117,000 per month. So this number is essentially a guesstimate. If they were to lose all of their traffic from Google, how much would they have to pay Google to be able to replace it? And they're coming in and estimated at essentially 117,000. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So these are the main metrics we're going to look at when evaluating the websites. And where I find it to be quite fascinating is look at the differences between the websites. And this is where you can see pretty quickly how complicated SEO can get, because here the DR, the domain rating for the site, is lower than IDEO, 76 versus 81. They have almost 17,000 live referring domains. So they've got more than double the actual referring domains, and they've got 48,000 organic keywords in the top 100. More than double, again, in the actual organic keyword rankings, the quantity here, but their traffic value is much less. So what's going on here? And this is where you have to go in and actually break down, okay, what kind of keywords do they have ranking for? Are most of these branded terms? Are these terms that people aren't really bidding on? Are these more expensive keywords? Do they have a more targeted SEO campaign? What does their content calendar or content strategy look like? What kind of content do they have built? What is that actually, kind of that breakdown? And we'll get into that a little bit later on here as well. There's a few more websites you can go through and break down. Again, you can see the numbers drop down dramatically. So here, they've got 297 referring domains, and the UR and DR. When looking at this, one of the main key components you're going to see is this referring domain number. Oftentimes, it's going to have a direct impact over here, and over here, and over here. So if you really want to understand these numbers, you can really look at the referring domains and get an idea of what's going on with the site. You can look at how these are linked to the site and break down, okay, this is kind of what's going on. This is how they could improve. This is how they could do better. Delve, again, they've actually got a lot more referring domains. So one thing you want is just any referring domain isn't going to cut it. You need to get links, referring domains from other referring domains that are authoritative. The most common thing I see is people say, we're building referring domains. We've got links coming in, but we're not moving up. The problem is, if you look at what the links are being built for them, or they're building, most of these here are going to be a DR of less than 10. Might be 5, it might be 0, to be quite honest. So it really, you have to look at, okay, these are links that are being built, so we've got a good quantity. Now you need to assess the quality of the links. They need to be a good DR authority. Is essentially one of the biggest qualifications for a website in the SEO term is going to be the DR. Is a DR 30, a DR 10? What kind of authority do they have? Normally, if you have a good DR, you have good organic traffic coming in, and it makes it a viable website to get a link from, so you can become more authoritative. Essentially, the more links you have coming into your site, think of it as a review, a 5-star review, or a 1-star review. If you want to go visit say a restaurant, and you see all these restaurants, and they've got one that is very similar to another one in the same geographic region, and the first one has 5 5-star reviews. Okay, great. The second one is the same kind of food, about the same location. It has 500 5-star reviews. Which one would you choose? Most people say, well, the one with more reviews is more, the odds are in my favor. I'm going to like it as well. It's 500 people versus 5. Those could be family members that may not be that legit. So people are going to go with more. And Google's very much the same way. If you can get more 5-star reviews, the more likely it is that you're going to be more trusted. So you want to make sure that they are as high a review as you can get. not essentially a 10 or a 0 DR link to your website is more like a 1-star, maybe a 2-star review. So our client website was starting with these metrics. This is essentially our starting point. UR of 35, DR of 26, referring domains of 136, organic keywords 872, and traffic value of just under $500. Again, I find this incredibly valuable because this shows the starting point of where we're at. As a business owner, you got to be able to kind of know what your expectations are, and this takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. That you saw there were some huge discrepancies with the number of referring domains. Some had over 2,000 referring domains and really didn't have that much. So there's no guarantee that if you hire someone, and one thing you want to be aware of is if they say, oh, I'm going to build 100 links per month to your website, you're going to want to ask, okay, what's the quality of these links? For how much money? If it's going to cost me $100, I would be suspicious. If it's going to cost you $1,000, I would be very suspicious because that's very difficult to do. So SEO can be done ethically and it can be done unethically. And unfortunately, you have to know to ask the right kinds of questions to determine which one is which. So be very much aware of that. And then it also helps set expectations of if a business owner comes in and says, well, hey, I want to compete with Frog Designs. And they say, well, after 6 months, well, hey, how come I'm not there? My expectations were I should be able to be competing with those guys. I'm paying you guys 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is per month. How come we're not competing with them? You can go back and you can quantify and say, well, ultimately, it's pretty self-explanatory. Referring domains, we said we build 50 per month, and we have to get to 7,000 to be in the same ballpark. We're not doing that. So if you're building 500 per year, you can kind of break down and say how long it's going to take. And again, they can be more qualitative. There's all kinds of things you can do to put it in your favor. But if you think you're going to compete with Frog Designs with even 1,000 referring domains, no matter how great your SEO might be, how great the content might be, uh, chances are it's not going to happen. So it can really help to kind of set expectations and really just some transparency to understand why it's not going to happen sooner. So I equate the audit very much to a roadmap. For a roadmap to be effective, it has to have three things. It has to be relevant to your location. It has to show where you're going on the roadmap, but just as important as where you're going, it has to show you where you're currently at. If you don't know where you are, you can't map that course for where you're going to go. So that's really what the audit is for. Keeps you from preventing the waste of a lot of investment, time, money, you name it. Set the expectations, gives you an understanding of what you're looking at, why you're looking to go the direction you are, and really break that down. Now that we've got that laid out, the next component we're going to look at is the keyword difficulty. One of the reasons we want to look at the keyword difficulty is because we want to understand in the SEO world, it could take months or years to get a ranking for a particular keyword phrase, depending on what it is. SEO is very much competitor focused. Keep in mind, Google has their list of favorite websites they already have a ranking for. You need to come in and convince Google that you're better than who they've currently chosen. So the reason you have to be able to explain to them why you're better than who they currently have ranking and be able to get that kind of vote, shall we say. So I equate it very much if you're doing a foot race. A simple analogy would be, okay, I'm 43 years old. So if I'm going to do a foot race against somebody, am I racing against someone in kindergarten, in elementary school, or are they Olympic athletes? Because if they're in kindergarten, I feel like I could probably do pretty good. If they're in elementary school, sixth grader might have a problem. You never know. I'll probably pull a hamstring or something. Who knows? Joys of getting old. But if you are competing against an Olympic athlete, I'm pretty well hosed. It's not going to happen. So really just understanding who your competition is and when you can get a ranking for a keyword phrase. I don't want to be investing in SEO for 10 months, 12 months, 24 months before I can expect to see some kind of a result. If you do your homework correctly, you can really find those quick wins, get some wins coming in the first 3, 4, 5, 6 months, see that traffic coming in, maybe you increase your sales off of SEO, and then have your long-term strategy. So understanding the keywords you're going after and breaking that up into a short-term and a long-term strategy can really set your SEO strategy apart in general from your competition in a very big way. So one thing to look at is Ahrefs also has a keyword difficulty tool. Most of the keyword tools out there have this. It is a function that most companies will offer. And most of the times, the keyword difficulty score is based on the number of referring domains. So the way this breaks down is they have different categories: easy, medium, hard, and super hard. It's based on the number of referring domains that a website has on average in the top 10 to be able to have that ranking. So a 16 is a medium. On average, you have to have between 11 and 36 referring domains to be able to rank for that given keyword term. So this was industrial design firms was the actual keyword term, and it had a volume of 350. So one thing you need to step back and say, okay, how many referring domains would I need to get that ranking? Is there enough volume? Now, the volume is one of those things where you really need to understand your business strategy and the business itself and kind of marry that to your internet strategy. A volume of 350 really isn't a lot in internet terms. However, if this is your perfect keyword phrase that brings in the perfect client you want to have, 350 might be 10 times, 50 times more leads than you normally get based off of a given keyword term. So you really need to understand the business approach and then kind of marry that with what the internet data is showing you and put that into your strategy. Now, this next slide is where I feel like it gets exciting. I'm a little bit of a data geek, and I openly admit that. So bear with me here. So this is going to be the kind of analysis on frog design. You can go back and you look at these main metrics, and if you get your own Ahrefs account, you can see this is the data I'm talking about here. There's a lot more. They've got their own internal ranking system. They've got the number of live backlinks. So they've got 7,500 referring domains and 185,000 backlinks. They had 1.2 million at one point in time. They've got the keyword data, organic traffic. This is an estimate of how many visitors they have going to the website from organic traffic specifically, and then the traffic value, which we talked about before. So people will look at this and say, well, there's no way. I mean, that's 7,500 referring domains. That's so many. How can I start competing with that? You can look at some of their top keywords they've got: frog design, frog. You can see really they have this massive volume here, but it's for the keyword frog. So it is a branded term, but it may not be the ideal customer for them. So that does put a little bit of a different spin on things. Here is a tracking of the past 30 days, how many referring domains they built. The reason this is important from a competitive standpoint, if your closest competitor is building 50 links per month and you're feeling really good at building 10 per month, you can easily tell and say, well, I'm not even keeping pace with my closest competitor. So my links better be really good. I better have really good content, because if that's not the case, there's no way I'm going to be able to compete. And I am going to start losing ground to them. So I better be careful. A lot of times those 7,500 URLs, referring domains, are not going to the home page. And so there's an extra place within Ahrefs you can go to and say, okay, top pages, and do an actual structural breakdown of what that looks like. So here you can see the home page is by far their most valuable page. They even have a dollar amount. They have a number of keywords that page ranks for, a number of referring domains coming into that link, into that particular page. So if you look at this and say, okay, well, Frog Design Services, they've got 29 links coming into their site, and they've got 67 keywords versus 128 keywords. Really, their services page is going to be where most of their value is coming from. So it makes sense that that is going to be a more valuable page with much fewer keywords. And you can kind of see ultimately how it breaks down. But you want your own website to follow, I wouldn't say necessarily this structure, but you don't have to worry about having every single referring domain go to your homepage. So if you wanted to have 3,000 referring domains, a good SEO structure is not going to have them go to your homepage. It's actually going to build out and make each page that's most relevant authoritative for what it's relevant for. So there is a lot of people will want this. Say there's this strategy where they want the homepage to rank number one for everything. That is the worst SEO strategy ever, because you're not going to be able to do that. Google won't do it. because your website is not relevant. Your homepage is not relevant for everything. Even if you service all of those internal service pages per se with your homepage, it wants to find a match. So with Bear Fox Marketing, we have a Facebook page and we have an SEO page and we have our homepage. Ultimately, I want my SEO page to rank for SEO, not for branded terms. I mean, it's fine if it does, but I prefer to have my homepage rank for branded terms and my SEO page maybe be a second page. But ultimately, you want your service pages or your product pages to rank number one for what it's relevant for, as opposed to trying to force your homepage to rank number one for what it's maybe not the most relevant for. All right, so that being said, we're going to move on from that's essentially a little bit of your competitive analysis. Again, we get a lot more in depth, but to really arm you with the information you need to make an educated decision on kind of what you're looking at. Those are really some of the top line metrics you want to look at and be aware of before you start competing with some of these companies out there. The next element to understand about the links that are being built is we talked about how it's important to have links coming into your website. First of all, that are referring domains is to be the focus, and not necessarily the quantity of backlinks. So you want referring domains and make sure they are quality referring domains coming in. And there's one added element you want to be aware of. So when you establish a link from one website to another, there is something called an anchor text. So in that link that you're driving or linking websites to, there is that blue text that you're going to see. You click on, you go to it. It is called the anchor text. So oftentimes you see click here is the anchor text. When building links, you want to be aware of what your anchor text ratios are. And this is where it gets a little bit more difficult to understand or to be able to do. And so this is where you want to make sure you've got a quality SEO person doing the work for you. So looking at here, so there are three main categories the anchor text will fall into. We have a blended anchors, an exact match anchors, and a natural anchors. Most of the time, there are general guidelines for those ratios to fall into. So the blended anchors are going to be the keyword plus your title tag, your brand, maybe a partial keyword, something along those lines. The exact match is going to be the exact keyword phrase you want to be ranked for. So an example of that would be if you are a pest control company and your exact match is pest control, and it's not the name of your company, that is going to be an exact match anchor of a keyword phrase that you want to be ranked for. Here we saw design firm, architectural design firm, whatever the case might be. The name of your company is going to be the blended anchors, but your actual service or keyword phrase you want ranking for is most likely going to be the exact match. And then we have the natural anchors. The natural anchors are going to be the ones that are probably the least attractive. They're going to be the click here, the website name, the URL, generic, the home URL. There's going to be no text. It might be an image, whatever the case might be. Believe it or not, most of your anchors should be in that category, with the blended anchors coming in second and the exact match being third. There is such a thing called, if you go to Google and type in Google Bomb, B-O-M-B, you can get a couple great articles. There's one from Screaming Frog. I think it was number 1 or number 2 for that particular term. And it shows a little of the history of why this anchor text is important. There was people have been targeted, everyone from Chuck Norris to George Bush to Mitt Romney, and just across the board of people who have been targeted for certain keyword phrases to have them show up. One simple example is a lot of people got together and didn't like George Bush. And so what they did is they had a campaign that had a bunch of websites with the link miserable failure. So instead of click here, it said miserable failure. And you clicked on that. And if you Googled miserable failure, the whitehouse.org came up number 1. He was in office. So it was a way to kind of target him and say, hey, this is what we think of you. A lot of people found it very funny. Google did not. It was one of those things where Google's essentially their algorithm to some degree had been hacked. They could get websites to rank number 1 that really shouldn't have been ranked number 1 for certain keyword phrases. So what the reason it's important to you here is I have seen it. I have seen people go out and they will hire an SEO that will guarantee I'll get you ranked number 1 for this keyword term no matter what. Well, the problem is they're doing things they really probably shouldn't be. They're getting links that are not good links, and they're exceeding good practices. One of those is exact match anchors, because the actual anchor text phrase is being used is very influential. Google watches and monitors how many of your links have that exact phrase. And if it exceeds what they consider to be acceptable, again, it's different per niche. Wherever the niche might be, it's different. So if Google deems it to be acceptable or not acceptable, depending on their criteria, you can get blacklisted, you can get banned from Google, you can get penalized. All those factors come into play. So you really want to make sure you're careful with how you build up those particular phrases and how often you use them. So you've got to make sure you have the quality and then the quantity. And they're really also going to look at kind of this slight nuance of make sure you're not trying to get a particular keyword phrase and make that an emphasis of the links you're building, because you will get penalized for it. All right, now we're just about done, but I want to go over the keyword analysis, and this part is really still very important. You've got to make sure you get this dialed in. So I break it up into a short-term, mid-term, and a long-term strategy. I've got the what I call a quick win category, and then I have some actual landing pages on a website that I want to build out. So the way I differentiate it is I've got the category here, and then I've got a forward slash, and tells me this is an actual internal page. And then this is new mobility as an actual category. So when I work with a client, I have an Excel sheet and I build out all of these keyword terms within a category, and I actually look at the website itself. The first thing I want to look at here is this internal page. Just to explain what I'm doing here is I want to look at, I do not want to reinvent the wheel. So I'm looking at your existing website and I want to find what keyword terms you have ranked on page 2 through 4 already. I mentioned this earlier in the website presentation, just to let you know, okay, I'm looking to see what Google's already found the site relevant for and authoritative to the point where you're on those pages. So if I can make it an emphasis of a little bit of anchor text, some of the links that are being built to the website to make sure it is an emphasis of the website internally and externally, I'm going to do that. And so I look at that and say, okay, yes, this site is ranked for some great keyword terms. I'd love to push it up. They're not actually difficult. They are valuable. Let's try and make that emphasis for the next several months. So there's essentially 4 major columns I look at here. As I look at the cost per click, I look at the volume, the difficulty, and the ranking time frame. Ranking time frame is fairly conservative. There are a number of factors that go into play there. The keyword difficulty is one of those. Your existing ranking is one of those, and the who you're competing against is another one. So a ranking time frame could be, for a short-term strategy, 3 to 6 months. It could be 12 months plus. It just depends on who you're competing against and why. Generally speaking, it's usually around a 6-month mark. It is a pretty confident time frame you can get going if you have a good sized budget. Let's say a $5,000 to $10,000 a month budget. You can get there a lot sooner. Sometimes you need a lot less. It just depends. Again, if you're competing against people like in this particular category who have thousands and thousands of referring domains, you're going to have to get aggressive to start building those. So cost per click. This is one thing that is, it's not unique to Bear Fox or the way we do it, but is a metric that I look at to understand the value of a keyword. Cost per click is a Google Ads metric. And because Google Ads is auction based, competitors drive up the price. So ideally, not always the case, but ideally, if a keyword is expensive, it's expensive because your competition is bidding on it because it brings in paying customers. So I want that value to come in and have valuable keywords of paying customers that I'm getting ranked for. And then it's one metric. But again, you have to understand the business. Yeah, as long as you understand that this is the kind of customer I want to have, this is the phrase that customer is typing in. It could be a cheap keyword and you're still going to be happy because you're going to be converting. But again, ultimately, you have to understand that from the business perspective and make sure you're privy to that information. And then that is the kind of short-term strategy we have here. We have a quick wins category. Again, this is going to look at the homepage, any particular internal pages they have, look at that cost per click. And this particular category actually had a total search volume of about 15,000 searches per month that was possible there. The average difficulty score across all of those keyword terms was a 6. So it's in the easy range. And then we gave them a ranking time frame of 6 to 9 months. It's fairly conservative. I feel like we could probably get there in less than 6 months with this particular client. But again, it depends. So these are some of the terms we're looking at. We've got the kind of parent category, and we have a long-term strategy here as well. So we've got the home page, a sustainability kind of category we're looking at here, and then a user-centered solutions category. You can see the cost per click goes up quite a bit, and unfortunately, so does the difficulty score. So that is something to take into account, but the volume, I feel like would justify that. And the ranking time frame, we said really you're going to be looking at about 12 months plus. Now, one thing we do here at Bear Fox is we actually want to monitor that top 100. A lot of SEO firms will look and say, okay, we're going to optimize your website for 5, 10, or 20, 100, whatever keywords it is. I want to keep an eye on all of them. It's quite possible, and I've seen it happen, that there are certain pages that Google just starts to rank really well. I'm not sure how their algorithm is set up in this particular niche. No one does, but I want to have more data and then kind of filter it down. So if there's a particular page that gets momentum for a given keyword phrase, and I can piggyback on that and push that up to the first page instead of having it stall out on page 4 or page 3, then so be it. So if I can see that, I want to run with that. But that's one thing that I take into account when doing that and monitoring your website for its overall site health and the progress it makes. I want to understand all the keywords and the pages that are making progress. And the way this looks at, okay, so right here, the 67,000 looks awesome. That's great. 67,000 searches per month. In 12 months, I'm going to be killing it. Okay, that's not what that actually means. That's the total search volume. Now, what that means for you as a business owner, that means you are going to have, if you had a top 10 ranking for all of those keywords in that given time frame, you can expect about a 10, well, it's about a 15 to an 18% click-through rate. Let's say 10% to be conservative. So if you got a top 10 ranking for all those keyword terms, you'd have about 6,700 more people coming to your website every month. So that's how many people would click to actually go visit your website. Realistically, you're probably going to be closer to maybe 9 or 10,000 is probably a pretty safe bet, but in somewhere in that range. And then you're going to have your conversion rate from that point. Those people coming in, if they're good keywords, they'll be calling, they'll be emailing, they'll be looking to interact with you on some level. That's when you can start to capture their email accounts. You can start chatting with them, and then you kind of take the next step to be able to optimize the traffic you're getting in and how you want to monetize that new SEO traffic. But that's what that really means. So when someone says, oh, there's 70,000 searches a month for all these keyword terms, we're going to optimize your site for it. What that actually means for you in clicks coming to your site and actual traffic to your site is going to be in the 15% of whatever that number is once you get a top 10 ranking for it. So that's what the real numbers look like. And then you can see the average cost per click to kind of take that into account to make sure there is some value there from a Google Ads perspective coming in.